The setting of this tale is Patna, in the state of Bihar. The narrative centers on Shehnaz and Jafaruddin. Shehnaz was raised in a loving home in Patna. Her parents thought it was time to locate her a suitable marriage as she grew into a young lady. They were looking for someone who was settled down and well educated, a guy who could provide Shehnaz with a happy and comfortable existence. Following a protracted search, they eventually located Jafaruddin, a young guy from the nearby town of Lakhisrai in Patna. Jafaruddin, an electrical engineer, was employed in Saudi Arabia in a high-profile position. This was seen as a great chance, evidence that he might guarantee a bright future. After the proposal was made, Shehnaz's parents accepted it as the ideal match. The wedding was a lavish event full of happiness and hope for the future. Shehnaz and Jafaruddin's lives together got off to a lovely start after marriage. For a time, the couple seemed content, and everything continued as usual. With time, Jafaruddin made the decision to resign from his Saudi Arabian position. He relocated to Noida in search of a new beginning nearer to home, together with Shehnaz and his 2 young boys. They resided in Noida for 2 years as they got used to their new routine. However, when May drew nearer and the Eid holiday arrived, Jafaruddin recommended a trip home. It seemed like the ideal moment to return to Patna as they had not been there in a while, especially with Eid approaching. Furthermore, Jafaruddin had used the money he had carefully collected throughout his years in Saudi Arabia to build a new house just adjacent to Shehnaz's parents' residence. They were excited at the prospect of celebrating Eid in their new house. With much anticipation, they took a journey from Delhi to Patna on May 1st. On the evening of May 2nd, the following day, Jafaruddin brought their boys shopping, maybe to get some special goodies or presents for the occasion. Shehnaz cooked a sumptuous meal later that evening, which included chicken biryani, Jafaruddin's favorite dish. After having supper with his spouse and kids, he retired to bed. His older kid got up early the next morning, ahead of everyone else. He headed to his father's room, feeling apprehensive. What he saw when he opened the door was absolutely horrifying. The corpse of his father was spread out on the ground. Next to him was a blood-smeared pressure cooker. The pressure cooker seems to have been used as a weapon. The son was so shocked that his voice echoed throughout the home as he yelled in terror. Shehnaz, his wife, and the other members of the family hurried to the scene. The story quickly traveled among the neighbors, who gathered as it did. The day before Eid was supposed to be joyful, but there was suddenly a great deal of sadness in the family. The festivities gave way to a period of grief. The cops were contacted right away. They were prompt in their arrival, seized the corpse, and sent it for a post-mortem analysis. The inquiry got underway right away. In an effort to get information, the police began interviewing neighbors and family members. When they talked with the son, he said that he had gone to his father's room after waking up early and saw him laying there, dead. Shehnaz was asked to describe the events of that evening. She began by stating that they had gone shopping for Eid together earlier in the evening. They enjoyed supper together as a family after getting back home, and everything seemed normal. However, she was abruptly woken at about 3 in the morning by odd sounds. She got out of bed and went to investigate the situation since she was scared and curious. She was ambushed by 2 strangers as soon as she left. One of them covered her nose with their palm after they grabbed her violently and took her jewels. She sensed that they were dealing with something unusual, and then all she knew was darkness and she would never wake up. The cops first thought this was a robbery, but something didn't seem right. In the home, nothing was taken save Shehnaz's jewelry. The cops were suspicious because of this. Why would the trespassers murder someone while leaving nothing of value behind? The police started to think of another reason. One of the police said, "This suggests that the attackers might not have come just to rob the house. but rather may have had a personal grudge or enmity. After then, the police began interviewing everyone in depth in an effort to find any potential clues. They learned that Shehnaz's spouse, Jafaruddin, had worked distant from home for the most of his life, living outside of Bihar. He had few friends or acquaintances in the neighborhood as a result, and as far as anybody knew, he had no enemies either. The cops couldn't help but think it was odd that none of the jewels or cash in the residence had been stolen. They were suspicious of something because of this strange fact. They started closely scrutinizing every method someone may have entered or left the residence in an effort to learn more. They checked everything and found that the front door was the only access into the home. There were no more doors or openings. The fact that there were no indications of forced entry just added to the mystery. There were no damaged windows, no broken doors, and no tampered with locks. Whoever entered the residence seemed to do so without any difficulty, which raises the possibility that they were a resident of the home. This created the uncomfortable prospect that a member of the family may have been the invader. The authorities frequently questioned Shehnaz and other family members, but they were unable to get conclusive answers. They requested Shehnaz's cell phone in order to continue their investigation, since they were eager to locate some leads. Shehnaz gave up her iPhone without hesitation, saying it was a present from her spouse a while back. In an attempt to uncover a clue, the police looked closely at the phone and went through its call logs. However, even after reviewing the specifics, they were left with nothing. Though they were perplexed, the police couldn't get rid of the feeling that a member of the family could have been engaged in the crime. The two kids were immediately ruled out as suspects since they were still too young to be capable of such an act. Though crimes might be committed by anybody at any age, Shehnaz became the police's major target. They made the discreet and quiet decision to look into the matter, speaking with neighbors and relatives, and without drawing too much attention to themselves. They inquired about everything, including the date of Shehnaz and Jafaruddin's marriage, Jafaruddin's departure from Saudi Arabia and his return to India, and his decision to settle in Noida. Something odd was discovered by the cops during their investigation. Jafaruddin had not visited Shehnaz's family to celebrate Eid in the previous 2 years. They couldn't help but wonder why he'd chosen this year to do it. Further information emerged as the inquiry progressed. Narratives about Shehnaz's history have contributed to the case's intricacy. It was found that Shehnaz had dated a man called Kamal when she was in school. Since they were spending so much time together, the school as a whole eventually heard of their bond. They would stroll about holding hands in a way that seemed like it was out of a movie, which many people found objectionable. Eventually, the principal and instructors were informed about the problem. It was discovered that a girl and a guy were publicly displaying their affection, and this was having an impact on the other pupils. The administrator contacted both parents to let them know that their kids' actions were creating a negative example for other kids. He cautioned them against engaging in such things at this time. Studying was the priority. Nevertheless, the two faced expulsion from school when they failed to alter their conduct. Following this, Kamal pursued his studies abroad for a period, while Shehnaz enrolled at another school. Later, Kamal made the decision to go to work in order to save up enough cash for Shehnaz's wedding. Since they were both off from school, the neighbors and others in the area heard about this tale. Shehnaz's connection with Kamal was eventually uncovered by her family. But there was a significant issue: cash. Shehnaz's family was wealthy, while Kamal's family was far impoverished. Due to this, and the fact that he was leading an unremarkable life, Kamal was not seen to be a good fit for marriage. Parents would never want to marry a jobless person to their daughter. The family's growing concern over time was that Shehnaz's relationship with Kamal would make it more difficult for her to find another husband. They so started looking for Shehnaz a suitable partner. Finding a neighbor, however, became difficult since everyone in the area was aware of her past with Kamal from their school days. At last, they heard of a youngster called Jafaruddin from some relatives. He was a well-respected electrical engineer who worked in Saudi Arabia and made a comfortable living. His family accepted the idea right away after meeting Shehnaz. Shehnaz and Jafaruddin were married in an arranged union. Jafaruddin left Shehnaz behind and went back to Saudi Arabia after the marriage. Shehnaz, meanwhile, got back in touch with Kamal, her childhood sweetheart. They gradually got closer once again. Jafaruddin remained oblivious to what was occurring since he spent the most of the year, 11 months, in Saudi Arabia and only returned home for a single month during holidays. Shehnaz had 2 sons at this period. Jafaruddin chose to purchase a plot of land adjacent to his in-laws' property and construct a beautiful home there since he was unable to relocate his family to Saudi Arabia. He intended for his wife and boys to reside there, with the in-laws close by in case they ever needed assistance, and constructed the home. Shehnaz and Kamal's love grew deeper over time. She would invite Kamal over to her place to spend time with her. Shehnaz's boys got older with time. Whenever Kamal paid them a visit, their younger son began referring to Kamal as father, even though he was too young to comprehend. Even the older boy was instructed to address Kamal as Abu, father. One day, Kamal was often visiting the home while Shehnaz was speaking. Something wasn't quite right between Kamal and his mother, as the older son, who was maturing and learning to distinguish between good and wrong, began to notice. He spoke a few times over the phone about Kamal's regular trips to his father. Shehnaz and Jafaruddin argued over the phone as a result. Already having trouble at work, Jafaruddin got into a fight with Shehnaz. He attempted to convey to her that they had a future together and 2 children. However, Shehnaz was unable to comprehend and began to see her husband as the enemy because of her unwavering love for Kamal. Jafaruddin made every attempt, but he was unable to persuade Shehnaz to agree with him. He thought maybe she might change, but it turned out she hadn't changed at all. For his wife's benefit, Jafaruddin departed from India. He decided to visit India, and upon there, he signed up with a Noida-based firm. This time, he moved to Noida to live with his wife and their 2 boys who were from Patna. He resolved that he would not allow Shehnaz to go back to Patna after relocating to Noida. For the 2 years that Shehnaz lived in Noida, Jafaruddin gradually began to think that Shehnaz had moved on from Kamal and that their romance was no longer going to last. He sensed that Shehnaz was no longer as infatuated with Kamal. Jafaruddin would have discovered anything if there had been anything odd over those 2 years, but he found nothing. He intended to spend his first Eid at his in-laws' home and wanted to bring his family there once he was certain that Shehnaz had changed and forgotten Kamal. Shehnaz was pleased to learn that they were to visit Patna on May 1st. Jafaruddin was sure there was nothing unusual about the iPhone he had given his wife as a present. He was unaware, however, that Shehnaz was surreptitiously using a different phone. This second phone, which Shehnaz kept concealed from him, was handed to her by Kamal and contained a SIM card registered in someone else's name. Shehnaz made sure Jafaruddin was never aware that she was talking to Kamal and sending messages via this covert phone when she was by herself. Shehnaz had assured Kamal throughout the last 2 years that everything was well and that Shehnaz had moved on. Shehnaz was ecstatic to have at last found relief from her troubles. Finding a minute to herself at home, she contacted Kamal and proposed that they use Eid as a chance to finally free themselves of Jafaruddin. In order for them to be together, get married, and lead happily ever after, she intended to remove him. Kamal was well prepared and understood precisely what needed to be done. Shehnaz was ready once he gave her the rundown on the strategy. Shehnaz took an early flight to Patna with her family on May 1st. Jafaruddin took his boys shopping for Eid later that night. Shehnaz contacted Kamal as soon as he departed, inviting him to the home. While Jafaruddin was away, she discreetly concealed Kamal in a room. Jafaruddin was still with Kamal when his boys fell asleep, and he returned with them. Shehnaz intended to assault Jafaruddin at night in the hopes that the kids would remain asleep and not see anything. She picked a fight with Jafaruddin over something irrelevant in order to get her plan started. She advised him to go to sleep in the drawing room during their quarrel. Jafaruddin nodded, angrily declaring he would not sleep with them. However, Jafaruddin was unaware that all of this was a part of a very bad scheme. If you've made it this far through our video, just hit the like button and remember to subscribe. I'm grateful. Jafaruddin was fast asleep at 3 in the morning when Shehnaz stealthily retrieved a pressure cooker from the kitchen and pulled Kamal out of hiding. Because they were afraid of being linked to them, they decided not to use knives or other sharp objects. Shehnaz and Kamal have seen a lot of criminal dramas with comparable techniques. They concluded that the fastest and most efficient method would be to use the bulky pressure cooker. They struck Jafaruddin in his sleep with a single powerful blow, making sure they got it perfect the first time. Shehnaz and Kamal repeatedly struck Jafaruddin on the head after the first assault, until they were certain he was dead. With everyone in the home still sound asleep at 3:30 a.m., Kamal hurriedly exited the house. After locking the door, Shehnaz bided his time till daybreak. She was going to hold off on telling her prepared narrative till her son woke up and found the dead. Shehnaz had prepared the narrative with great care, ready for when her son discovered the corpse in the early hours of the morning. The story she would tell would be that 2 burglars entered into her home, assaulted her, took her chain, murdered her husband, and then made off. It was obvious that robbery wasn't the underlying purpose, since there was nothing left for the chain and no additional items were gone. The attack's nature and the subsequent events demonstrated that personal animosity and retaliation, rather than a desire to steal, served as the primary motivation for the crime. The true offenders were soon uncovered due to the flaw in the tale that Shehnaz had made up to fool the authorities. Subsequently, the police uncovered further phone records on that phone, which proved to be vital evidence for their investigation. The arrests of Kamal and Shehnaz occurred on May 10, 2022. They went to court, and they are still in the process of being tried. Shehnaz and Kamal are now detained at Patna jail. The lone person lost in this terrible event was a hard-working, impoverished guy who simply wanted to provide for his family and make his wife happy. Without a parent, they departed. Their father's protecting shadow has vanished, and it's uncertain how long Shehnaz and Kamal will stay behind bars. This was the tale for today. Please remember to turn on alerts and give the video a like if you've watched it thus far. I'm grateful.